是为了满足老百姓最基本的利益、最基本的需要。最基本的需要是什么呢？他们的生存权、他们的自由权、他们的财产权。The whole purpose of the state is to secure people's basic interests or basic rights in life, liberty, and property. If the state doesn't do that, if the state abuses its power, if the state, instead of serving the people's interests, it serves the ruler's interests, what happens? Remember, the state should also, at some level, there should be a voluntary relation between the state and its people. It can be tacit, 默许, but there should be some, the people must choose their own rulers in some way or other, okay? And for John Locke, it meant through elections, basically. So the question is, well, what happens if the state is formed by violent conquest, or if the state begins to abuse its power? What do we do? Well, John Locke had a very extensive discussion of the right to rebel. 造反的权利 OK？ 但是你不可以随便造反，可能我估计他不一定会同意香港的一些学生，我们可以讨论。The people have a right to disobey, but only if there is a clear threat to their lives. It should be very clear, 很明显那个国家要破坏老百姓的生存权。Their liberty, 他们的自由 and their property, 他们的财产. If the state does not have a systematic threat to people's life, liberty, and property, then Locke's right to rebel does not apply, at least does not clearly apply. And the whole aim of the rebellion is to restore an elected legislative assembly that protects people's rights to life, liberty, and property. You can't rebel just because you want, something like, more, vacation time, right? You have to rebel because there's systematic violation of the rights to life, liberty, and property. And the aim of the rebellion is to restore those rights. Okay? So, John Locke says, 他也担心，如果大家都觉得有再犯的权利，是不是会导致很乱的情况？所以他回答 he says, no, it won't necessarily lead to chaos. It'll only lead to chaos. First of all, there's only rebellion if the abuses affect a large number of people. It can't be a small number of people. It has to be a large number of people whose systematic rights to life, liberty, and property are violated. And if that happens, then it's the tyrant who is responsible for the chaos, not those who rebel. 所以很多西方的记者他们觉得，虽然这些香港老百姓会用一些暴力，但是不是他们的责任，他们会这么想。And government, by consent, coupled by the right to rebel, is the best defense against rebellion. So he's saying, if you want to avoid chaos, you have to enshrine the right to rebel in a kind of constitution, as well as a government by consent, where the government choose their own people. So now we could look at the American constitutional system a little bit. The Bill of Rights famously protects, to be a little bit simplistic, the right to own a gun. 为什么美国人觉得这些权利是那么重要的？我们其他的国家都觉得有点奇怪。This is from the American Bill of Rights, Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia, that means just the people have a kind of little army being necessary to the security of a free state, the right to the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So why do Americans think that they have a right to own a gun? Because the people need to have power to rebel against an unjust government. It comes straight from Locke's theory, okay? Of course, now it seems ridiculous, right? The government has atomic bombs and so on. If the government carries unjust actions, it's not because people have a few guns that they could rebel against the government. But in his day, if ordinary people had guns, like societies like Switzerland are still like that, or Israel, then it ensures that people can rebel against the government if the government begins to systematically violate people's rights to life, liberty, and property. I mean, it seems crazy, but maybe it made sense in those days, right? So again, to understand American culture, you have to understand where they get these ideas from. So Locke's influence were very, very widespread, hugely influential. So Ireland was a colony that was exploited by England, and many Irish people rebelled against that exploitation, and they used Locke's ideas, especially the right to rebel, as a reason, as a justification for rebelling against the state. The French Revolution in 1789, also influenced by Locke's view, the French revolutionaries wanted to rebel against an absolute monarchy that violated their rights to life, liberty, and property. But the most clear and direct influence was on the American revolutionaries. Remember the American Revolution? I assume you studied some of that. Was in what year? 什么时候？你们知道吗？美国革命什么时候？1776年，基本上是100年以后，但是直接受到洛克理论的影响。我们可以看 ，this is a very famous Declaration of Independence, okay, from 1776, July 4th. It's still the day that Americans celebrate their birthday. You know, 像中国是 11, 美国是7月4号. That was the date when the Declaration of Independence from the United Kingdom. 当时美国和英国是有敌人的关系，美国想独立，他们想造反，为什么呢？直接是按照 Locke 的理论来讨论问题。我们会看 who signed this, very famous, right? Including Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, who basically was the main drafter of this. It's not a very long document, but it explicitly shows the influence of Locke's theory. 100年以后，独立宣言 ，OK， 我不知道你们读过没有，所以我们可以很仔细读。This is from the 独立宣言, from the Declaration of Independence. When in the course, this language comes straight from Locke, really. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have them connected. In other words, they have to rebel and to assume among the powers of the earth a separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. Remember, in the state of nature, Locke said we all have the equal rights to life, liberty, and property. When it comes time to rebel, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. 他们说我们为什么要独立？要讲得很清楚，为什么我们要造反？ 为什么讲得非常清楚，而且这些理由完全是符合洛克的理论。OK， 非常有意思。Look at this. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, remember it's men, not women, right, are created equal, 大家都很平等. They are all endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And among these are the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Actually, 还是有一些区别，最大的区别是什么？跟洛克的理论有什么区别？ Yeah, property. Locke would say property. They changed it to happiness. Actually, if you see the first draft of the American Declaration of Independence, they actually had property. They changed it. They said, 有一点太过分，我们不要直接讲财产。他们改了，说幸福。They changed property to happiness. That was the one major modification from Locke's theory. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. The people must agree to their form of government. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, that means whenever a government begins to systematically violate the rights to life, liberty, and happiness or property, it is the right of the people to abolish or alter the government. People have the right to abolish or alter their government and to institute a new government laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such a form as that seem likely to affect their safety, that means rights to life, and happiness. Happiness 有点模糊，但是他没有讲清楚 happiness 是什么东西，这方面有一些变化，但是其他方面完全是按照 Locke 的理论。但是你不可以随便造反，对不对？ Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes. 你不可以随便造反，你要理由应该很清楚。According all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing those forms to which they are accustomed. 所以你不要随便造反 ，OK？ 是他们这方面比较保守。但是 if there's a long train of abuses and usurpations, if there's many, many abuses of basic rights to life, liberty, and property, pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. Despotism just means here monarchy. It is their right, indeed, it is their duty to throw off such government. 他们一定要造反 and to provide new guards for their human security. Okay? So they're very, very explicit. 然后他说 We've been very, very patient. 因为当时美国是英国的殖民地，我们很耐心，但是现在我们真的受不了。Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, but now it's too late. Now is the necessity which constrains them to alter their systems of government. 我们要完全改我们的宪法，我们的政治制度。The history of the King of Britain, 这是我们的敌人，他们觉得 is a history of repeated injuries and abuses, 是很系统的，总是破坏我们的最基本的权利。All having the direct object, the establishment of an absolute tyranny over the states. So then, the rest of this, 所以这是第一部分，然后从这里都是他们都讲怎么英国的皇帝怎么破坏我们最基本的权利，所以他们觉得我们有理由造反 ，OK？ 我们可以比较，有人说，哎，那个 Locke 有点像，你们读过一些孟子对不对？孟子有一句话， 主要是这句话，这个 Joe 他是坏的统治者，对不对？所以我没听说过可以杀一个坏的统治者，但是你不可以杀一个君子。有人说这句话有一点像洛克造反权力的思想。你们觉得有最大？你们觉得还是有区别？你们觉得最大的区别是什么？你们读过这些？这个是很有意思因为现在很多学者他们在比较 Locke 的思想和孟子的思想，因为孟子也觉得那个统治者应该为民服务，对不对？而不是为自己服务，对不对？有一些民贵，然后你知道那句话吗？民为贵，然后对，君为轻，对不对？所以有一点类似的思想，但是最大的区别是什么？
是孟子认为他可以诛一夫纣矣，纣本来是商王，但是可以把他给诛杀，就是说不是以君王的名义诛杀，而是因为他失德，已经不配当作为君王，只是作为一个普通的义夫、普通的百姓，然后是把他以普通的百姓的身份诛杀的。当然，这个是我的理解啊。
对，但是什么？我们为什么他觉得不是一个君子，不是一个？他为什么变成坏的统治者？
这个是君，这里的君应该不是君子，这个君是君王。
对，所以君王，他为什么不是？君王和这些坏的统治者最大的区别是什么
？Virtue 美德。
OK， 但是 virtue 的内容是什么？跟 Locke 有什么区别？都是为民服务，为老百姓服务，对不对？这方面他们是一样的，但是可能最大的区别，孟子不会用这个个人的权利来表达那个思想，对不对？这是很重要的。然后 Locke 他强调老百姓应该选自己的政府，当然这方面孟子没有这样的思想。君王就是有点像 Aristotle 的 monarch，who rules for the people， 但是不一定是被老百姓选拔。反正还是有区别，还是觉得如果有人想写论文关于这个题目，还是值得写。我们OK，so 它的影响，当然最大的影响是直接影响美国的革命者。100年以后，这个非常清楚。但是还是有区别。Locke, he still believed that there had to be a property qualification for ruling. He agreed with Aristotle's idea of the polity, that if you have a little bit of property, you're more likely to favor stability and to have some virtues like loyalty, to the community. 现在，比如说，还是很多人会这么想。比如说，现在为什么中国的政治制度比较稳定？我觉得很重要的理由是因为大部分的老百姓有自己的房子，对不对？所以不要革命，对不对？但是美国的革命者，they established for the first time a form of voting that had no property qualification. First time， 当然 ，ancient Athens 也是这样的，但是，就是第一次有间接民主，没有财权的一些要求。Of course, citizen was only open to white males, right? It was founded on a slavery system. 美国有奴隶制，对不对？一直到1860年，因为当时有内战，然后解放黑人，对不对？解放奴隶。 So it was still very restricted, and of course it was only men, right? Women had no right to vote. But what's interesting is that 100年以后，1860年左右，谁反对奴隶，他们也会用 Locke 的理论来支持他们的革命 ，OK？ 会 Locke 的理论还是有非常大的影响。Of course, this one, we also looked at it already, that Locke, it was a very patriarchal ideology, 是大男子主义的思想. He said there's a foundation in nature for the rule of the husband as the abler and the stronger. But Locke, who is otherwise brilliant, it's not a very good argument, because feminists point out, well, if weaker men should have the same rights as stronger men, right? 大家都平等. Well, even if it's true that women are weaker, that's not a reason to deprive them of their rights, of their equal rights, right? 不管是男的还是女的，大家都应该有平等的权利，跟人的权利没有什么权利 power 应该没有什么关系. So therefore, women should also have equal rights. So some feminists also appealed to Locke's own theory, the deeper principles of Locke's theory, to favor giving equal rights to women. So his idea that political rule depends on the concept, on the consent of the people, 当然会影响民主理论的发展 ，OK？ 现在所有的西方的国家都觉得最基本的权利就是选自己的政府 ，OK？ And his ideas about justifiable rebellion, 造反概念的影响也会影响，尤其是在美国，现在是1950年、1960年左右，很多黑人他们还是会用我们不服从国家，因为这个服从是破坏我们最基本的权利，因为当时黑人现在也不是完全平等的关系，但是当时黑人都觉得我们都不平等，所以我们不要服从国家。当然他们会按照一些 Locke 的要求会考虑问题。